Hello.
Hi.
Here we go. How are you? So I think we have Rafe on the call, but he says he can't enable Michael video. So I apologize to the people waiting.
Totally fine, Rafe. We know how it goes. We know how it goes. So it's just a matter of the Australian time catching up with the Malaysian time. That's what it is. So Rafe, I'll have to ask you an echo. Are you blocked from using any other browser? What's going on today? Not playing very nice. So I think so while Rafe is trying to figure that part out, and I have a bit of an echo, I don't know why. We'll get him to do some stuff. All right, the echo is gone. So I think with Rafe's presentation, he wanted to share a very interesting slide deck with you all. We went through it yesterday, and he did it so well. But I think he's having a bit of a technical issue with what's going on with his mic and his camera. And we need to see Rafe. Like, that's important. We need to see him and hear what he has to say. So let's give him a few minutes just to
Here we go.
get that sorted. And, I think we got him. Australia picked up with us. Yes.
Hallelujah.
Did you run a marathon?
Yeah, apparently so. Apparently so. All right. Sorry for that short delay there. But we can get started. Paul, you okay if I just get started?
Yeah, absolutely. So jump right in. My only comment is if you want questions at the end or questions on the way through, if people have them.
Yep. Yeah. Questions on the way through. Welcome.
Great. So to the team on our session here today, if you have questions along the way, just shout them out, and I'll hand it over to Rafe to talk to us about what does the future of the industry look like. Rafe, welcome.
Awesome. I'm hearing a little bit of feedback, so if there's anyone who's not on mute, if you just wouldn't mind, that would be helpful. All right, let's get started with fancy animations and all that kind of stuff. So obviously you've already been welcome to LRVS. Fantastic event so far. So today what I'm going to be talking about is the future of the industry, and specifically the future of the industrial lubricants industry, right? So I think, most of us come from mostly lubricants. Obviously, this is the Lubricants and Reliability Virtual Summit. I can't really speak to the reliability space because I'm not an expert in that. but I do have a decent amount of experience with industrial lubricants. And what makes me qualified to talk about this? Well, really, it's not me that's qualified. It's all the people that I get to talk to that are qualified to talk to about this. So this is going to be a shameless plug, but there is a podcast called Lubrication Experts. If you haven't listened to it already, it's on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, all the rest of it. But I basically get to talk to a lot of people who are domain experts in the field of industrial lubrication, and as well kind of like associated fields. Now, everyone on the left, you'll notice, in that left-hand column is actually speaking today, and everyone on the right is actually a previous guest of LRVS. So people that attend this conference are well represented, and it speaks to the quality of the people that LRVS is able to attract as well. So the cool thing about getting to talk to about all these people is that there's a lot of really thoughtful people that have very, very narrow focuses. So, take, for example, Greg, right? Greg Livingston, obviously involved with Fluidtech, has a huge amount of experience, not just in lubricants, but specifically in that varnish mitigation field, and also speaks to sustainable lubrication. We can, for example, like Dr. Flores, he has a very, very narrow focus when it comes to SpaceX, and space lubrication is its own thing. But the cool thing about getting to talk to all these people is that you sort of get a bit of a pulse for where the industry is going and what's all that kind of like new technology that's just on the horizon. So when I do these interviews, I like to always end with a question about the future and what's happening in the next 5, 10, kind of 20 years, and that sort of helps shape my view, at least, on where I think that the industry is going. And I've really got 3 overarching trends that seem to be common whenever we talk about this. So first is the consolidation of knowledge. And where this really comes from is that I have this idea that the industry's golden generation is kind of retiring. And who do I mean by the golden generation? When it comes to lubrication as opposed to lubricants, most of the big names that you might think of, let's say, for example, Jim Fitch, one of the founders of Noria, Drew Troyer, again, one of the other founders of Noria, Mike Johnson, who is obviously from Noria, went on to found Amri. You've got Mike Holloway from Fifth Order Industry. These guys are sort of industry stalwarts that have been around for a very long time and really were kind of the innovators when it came to lubrication and its relationship to reliability. And unfortunately, there's a whole banner of these guys that are kind of on the verge of retirement. Now, I don't think that they're going away immediately. These guys are pretty robust and are probably going to be working for the next couple of decades, but there is going to be some kind of transition. Interestingly, in the formulation space, when you talk to, let's say, the likes of Mobil and sort of Castrol, Shell, a lot of their industrial formulators have actually already gone through this transition and have already retired. So a lot of them use COVID as an excuse to, take a big package and kind of walk away, or they were, nearing retirement age and just felt like it was a good time to step away from the industry. So from a formulation standpoint, we've lost a lot of expertise already. And in the lubrication reliability space, we're about to. So at some stage, we've really got to transfer that knowledge across. Now, a lot of people are going to say, this is not unique to the lubricants industry. This is something that every, let's say, engineering discipline is facing, right? It's the baby boomers that are on the verge of retirement. And there is some truth to that statement. I think what makes it uniquely challenging for us is that it is more difficult for us to recruit talent, because I think we can be honest enough to say no one grows up wanting to become a lubrication engineer, right? Maybe people grow up wanting to get involved in the petroleum industry. The mining industry is a popular one here in Australia, space industry, automobiles. These are all things that people grow up wanting to do. I find that when you talk to 90 to 95% of people in our industry and you ask, how did you get into lubricants? Generally, they say, by accident, right? I just fell into the job, but once I got here, I fell in love with it and I've stayed ever since, right? So we can't rely on accident and chance to bring new blood into our industry and hope that that knowledge transfer happens. And so what we need to do is we really need to train people at scale, right? So, I'm trying to do this through the YouTube channel a little bit, but ultimately it's going to need many, many hands to make light work of it. More events. Basically what's happening is that, once upon a time, lubrication used to be, quite a big team within a lot of these let's say, mining and oil and gas companies, and they've been downsized. So they don't have sufficient scale within these organizations to be able to transfer knowledge within an organization. So that really means that we need to go to external events like LRVS, where we can network, where we can share knowledge, we can share experiences across different businesses. So that's where I think, more events. Now, some people think that we're kind of we're a bit tapped out when it comes to events. I kind of look at the calendar, and there are an absurd number of conferences, especially now that COVID's over. But I think that they're actually needed, and especially some of these virtual events where you don't need to spend the time and the expense to attend them. And I think there's going to be a lot more online learning as well, because as the number of people with expertise kind of narrows, the few people that are left are going to need to teach a lot of people that are kind of getting their start in the industry. All right, so that's the first one, is kind of knowledge. The second trend, I think, is an obvious one, but it's called sustainable lubrication. And a lot of people are probably talking about this in this track. But I kind of boil it down to 4 kind of micro trends within this. So the first is a bigger emphasis on just extending oil life. And there's a number of ways that we can do that. Second is an emphasis on bio-based lube oils. Third is looking at recycled lubricants. And fourth is looking a little bit more in detail at energy efficient oils. And when you put all these together, you kind of get sustainable lubrication. Okay, so let's talk drain extension first. I think there's a lot that we can do here in terms of reconditioning of lubricants. That's not really something that the industry has historically done a lot of. Filtration, obviously, there's been a lot of emphasis, but I think a lot of businesses are only just slowly figuring out that filtration doesn't just necessarily mean particulate filtration. Maybe it means removal of water. Maybe it also means removal of acid and oxidation byproducts. Improved criteria for oil drains as well. I work with a lot of companies that operate gas engines who kind of drain their oil on arbitrary numbers. So I think that improving everyone's understanding is going to help a lot there. Bio-based lube oils is also one that's getting a lot more, attention is the word I'm looking for. So in the past, there were probably a lot of companies that shied away from using EALs because they felt it was unnecessary. Now I'm seeing people, in water infrastructure industry, people even in farming, for example, becoming more aware of this problem and the need to use them. And there's also going to have to be some technical solutions here as well, because let's say, for example, with EALs would be a good example, or ester derivatives, we historically haven't had access to high viscosity versions of a lot of these lubricants. And so there's some technological development that needs to go on to be able to develop, bio-based gear oils, for example. Okay, recycled lubricants. Now, this is one that I've tried to look into a little bit more as to, why is it that people are, let's say, unwilling to use recycled base oils, for example? The fact that companies use virgin base oils is often used as a selling point. They're proud of the fact that they use virgin base oils. That's a trend that I think we'll see people slowly move away from, especially as we realize there's sort of like the carbon impact of using virgin base oils for everything, right? There might still be some circumstances in which virgin is necessary, but I think recycled lubricants is going to become a lot more common. And that goes hand in hand with users having to understand what it means to recycle lubricants, right? So, for example, in Australia at the moment, there's very little that's done, or there's very little emphasis placed on segregation of oil waste streams, right? Generally, everyone just puts everything into one pot, and that makes recycling that oil infinitely more difficult. But if you could segregate it into, R&O oils, anti-wear oils, engine oils, that makes the recycler's job a lot easier. And so I think you're probably going to see a little bit of legislation as well. So it's going to be a bit of carrot and stick that's going to force a lot of users into kind of acting in a way that will enable the recycling of lubricants. Finally, we've got the use of energy efficient oils. And this is not new, right, by any stretch of the imagination. This is a trend that's been going on for 20 years. In engine oils, we've seen the use of lower and lower viscosity lubricants. So, a 0W8, for example, is a thing now. when back, in the day, a straight SAE 40 was about all you could get away with. So we're slowly reducing the viscosity in order to get energy efficiency improvements. And you'll probably see that start to happen across the board, right? So an example would be, for example, in some gear oils, right? Wind turbine gear oils have been, and for the foreseeable future, are going to be ISO 320. Well, maybe there's some technological breakthroughs that we can get to where we can reduce the viscosity and improve the efficiency of the wind turbine. The use of alternate base oils is something that's always been done. And I'll talk a little bit more in this next section about what I would term, kind of film forming additives. All right, so this final trend I would call like custom lubricant solutions. All right, so I just did a bit of a straw poll of some of my customers. This is not scientific by any stretch of the imagination. And I said, how many of you would consider drop-in oil additives? And 65% of the respondents, there are only 20, so that's why we're rounding up to the nearest 5, said that they would. And that was a little bit shocking for me because historically, this has been something that I think a lot of businesses exhibited a lot of caution around, because the messaging from a lot of oil companies has always been, no, drop-in additive solutions, particularly in industrial applications, are a no-no. We have formulated our lubricants for a specific purpose, so you should only use, the original lubricant. And, honestly, a lot of the credit has to go to Fluidtech in some ways for ushering in the idea that, drop-in additives are potentially performance enhancing, but also safe to use. Right now, there's a whole bunch of work that needs to go behind that, right? In terms of testing compatibility with a whole range of oils, testing the fact that you're not going to have any negative consequences. But because that has been done in that sort of turbo machinery space where we have high value assets, and that's been tested and proven to work, now I'm starting to see it trickle down into a whole bunch of the other industries as well, where a lot of other companies are now starting to say, okay, well, if that model has worked, maybe we can start to apply solvency enhancers in hydraulic oil applications would be a good example. Mobile equipment. Now we're looking at, because ESD has become such a big problem, not just in turbo machinery, but in other applications, people are looking at conductivity enhancers. So how can I raise the conductivity of the oil, again, without negatively affecting other performance parameters, but how can I raise the conductivity to reduce the chances of ESD? All right, so a lot of these kind of drop-in additives, decon would be a good example, are starting to become a little bit more common. And I think if I had to project, 5-10 years into the future, quite a lot of businesses are going to be going this way. I know, for example, that with at least 2 or 3 of the majors that I've talked to recently, they're actually looking at drop-in additive solutions for wind turbine gear oils, because at the moment, wind turbine gear oils need to last about 10 years. That's how much they're warranted for, and it's the additive package which depletes, right? So if that's the choke point, the way that you extend the oil life is by replenishing just the ad pack. All right. One of the other ways is that one of the other big things is being nanoparticles, specifically for friction reduction and looking at improving microfitting performance. Now, historically, nanoparticles have been used in sort of like the PCMO space. So when I say that, passenger car motor oils. So if you think of the likes of kind of Lucas Oil, and there's a Hot Shot Secret, there's a whole range of brand names in the US where they sell little additives that might be TBN boosters or friction reduction additives and things like that. We're now starting to see a lot of that development begin to move its way into industrial as people realize that there is an appetite for friction reduction in industrial applications as well. And the amount of research that's gone into nanoparticles has just like exploded over the past, let's say, 10 years. And it's now getting to the point where it's probably going to have some kind of commercial application. So what are the kinds of nanoparticles we're talking about? I've seen graphene, for example, used as a friction reduction additive. Tungsten disulfide. I've seen some really exotic tungsten-based nano additives as well. There's one that looks like a Buckminster fullerene. So they've basically created a buckyball out of tungsten disulfide in order to enhance friction reduction. There's a handful of copper-based nano additives as well that are out on the market. So all of these solutions are looking at friction reduction. And again, because a lot of work has been done in turbo machinery to get people comfortable with the idea of drop-in additives, this is now starting to make its way into, well, how can we use some of these friction reduction additives for the likes of, gearboxes and compressors to enhance their performance? So I know that was a lot. I was trying to get through there weren't any questions, so I was trying to make sure I got through in 20 minutes, so we've got time for questions, because hopefully this has kind of like sparked some ideas for the group. So that was really the three major trends that I could identify for all the discussions I've had. It's the need to really transfer knowledge at a very high level, right? We've got the sustainability imperative that takes 4 different kind of technical versions, and then we've got this idea of drop-in additives, which I think is going to become really big over the next 10 years. So, with that, are there any questions?
Rafe, if you can hear me from my side, I think it's echoing for the rest of the team if I'm on my mic, so I do apologize for that. There is a couple of questions here, so if you can bear with me. So from Paul Hillier, how frequently are OEM specs tweaked or outrightly ignored already?
Yeah, that's a great question. Okay. So that speaks actually to potentially another trend as well, right? I think the question that Paul's getting at is, for end users, how often are they ignoring OEM specs? Now, I can't speak for around the world, but generally what I find is OEM specs are adhered to so long as there is some kind of commercial imperative. That is to say, as long as there is a warranty involved. And as soon as that warranty expires, then it's like open season. You can basically use anything. There are still businesses out there that desire that kind of OEM performance, right? And will still always want that. But there is actually another driver, say, for example, here in Australia, there's a bit of a top-down initiative from a few of the state governments that want where possible, everywhere in the supply chain, if there is a locally manufactured option, that they want you to take that. And because infrastructure builds are so big in Australia at the moment, with the number of highways and train lines and all that kind of stuff being built, that's forcing a lot of people to look at local alternatives. We don't have a big manufacturing base in Australia, which means that most of the time you are going to an option that doesn't have OEM approvals. And so that requires a little bit of expertise and nuance on the part of the end user to source a product that is going to match kind of performance like for like.
And maybe just our last question here. Angus has just dropped in. Amazed by 65% results for the support for drop-in additives such as Fluitex Decon. We still note a lot of resistance from end user clients, and lube companies tend to still object to their use. Maybe it's more of a comment. Times are changing though. I certainly saw it when I was at Oil Dock in Germany. There was presentations there from, if I recall, Castrol talking about a drop-in lube additive for wind turbine oil. So it's definitely coming from the lube oil companies for sure. We're coming up to the end. It's 3 minutes left on this session, and I do apologise for a bit of an audio issue and a delay in our start. But Rafe, really thank you so much for sharing with us today. And I'm a reader and viewer of your content through LinkedIn, as I'm sure many of the people online are as well. So thank you so much for your time.
No, I appreciate that. And if anyone's got any questions, feel free to get a hold of me through LinkedIn or message me through this stuff, or send me an email. More than happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you for everyone that was involved, and some great comments and questions coming through online as well. And we'll end the session now. Thanks, Rafe. Thank you.